everybody, I'm Kate Cast, and welcome to our edition of Let's Talk About, and welcome to the latest installment of MCU TV. As the Disney Plus miniseries continued, it was time to head to a more conventional area of the MCU, with a pair of leads reinventing themselves alongside an ever-changing world in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. As Captain America's former teammates try to adjust back to everyday life without their friend, an extremist group known as the Flag Smashers make themselves known. Sam and Bucky decide to team up and stop those who wish to harm the innocent, while figuring out what it really means to stand for something and to do it behind that iconic shield. You might already know this, but Falcon the Winter Soldier was originally meant to be the first Marvel show on Disney+, but it wound up being WandaVision instead. I can only assume that this was due to complications and delays caused by the pandemic, and WandaVision was just finished sooner, so they decided to move it up. While that ultimately wound up being for the best, it does make a lot of sense to me that this was supposed to be the first show, because in terms of its approach, it is the most familiar to what we're used to. With a 10-minute action chase sequence sending one of the Avengers off on a mission and watching them kick butt. A sequence that, if I didn't know any better, I'd swear was ripped right from the main Captain America movies. Maybe it's because I watched this episode for the first time on the biggest TV in my house, but wow, was the sequence a rush. Definitely of movie quality, even by the higher standards set by TV today. With well choreographed hand-to-hand combat and an incredible segment of Sam flying through a canyon in pursuit of returning villain Batrak. Seriously, the timing and the reactions during this combat and chase is impeccable. This is where it clicked for me why this was originally supposed to be where the Marvel Disney Plus experiment began. It eases you into the idea by starting in a familiar place, assuring you that while this is a new approach to an MCU project, some things will stay the same and this is still the universe you love. But it also lets you know why these shows are going to be necessary to the expansion of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because it will give us a chance to explore side characters that up to this point, fans of them might feel have been neglected. Sam definitely falls into that category. For the record, I always liked Sam and thought he was a great character, but spending his screen time facing personal conflicts wasn't exactly a priority. Up until now, he's just been support. Great support, but support for the actual star nonetheless. But what happens when the star behind the Stars and Stripes is gone, and the sidekick is asked to take on the mantle? Well, according to the first 3/4 of the show, he doesn't. Despite getting Steve's blessing, Sam can't see himself as Captain America. He can't see anyone behind that shield besides his friend. It turns out the show will be about if Sam even wants to be Captain America. At first, the answer seems to be a resounding no, as Sam decides to spend more time with his sister and nephews in between missions. But the journey to find out if he did make the right decision, and all the implications of Sam theoretically taking on the mantle, will be the conflict that drives Sam's journey in the series going ahead. Then there's Bucky. Now yes, Bucky has had much more of his screen time dedicated to his character arc compared to Sam, but a complaint I often see from fans of Bucky, of which there are many, is that after Civil War, the character kind of became an afterthought. He gets blipped right after his treatment is complete in Wakanda, and he says his goodbyes to Steve off screen. Luckily, Falcon the Winter Soldier seeks to remedy this, acknowledging the fact that Bucky hasn't really had the time or opportunity to process anything since he's been free of his Winter Soldier programming and working through that. I honestly really like that they turned an audience criticism into a chance for character conflict. See, you could tell Bucky is on the path of reformation because he cut his emo anti-hero hair. Even if he's in a better place now, Bucky's struggling to come to terms with what he did as the Winter Soldier. He's constantly clinging to connections to his past before he was the Winter Soldier. The book he writes his list of amends to make in is Steve's book from when he got out of the ice. He has a freaking flip phone, and his mission outfit in this show resembles his uniform from when he was in the Howling Commandos. He doesn't even have a bed because he's not used to comfort. Yes, it's funny to hear Bucky make the same old man references that Steve used to.
How do you know about Gandalf?
I read The Hobbit in 1937 when it first came out.
And the ways he tries to make amends with who he encountered as the Winter Soldier.
What the hell?
But in between, he doesn't know what to do with himself without fight after fight. And with Steve gone, he's all alone in a modern world with no one who really understands him. Despite being given all the tools possible to readjust, he can't manage to do it. On the plus side, it's nice to know that therapists actually exist in this universe. Say, does she do group bookings? I know a few people who could use a session. As you might expect though, the show is at its peak when these two team up and work together. Whether willingly or reluctantly, it's always a good time. This is what I was most excited about when this project was announced. Anthony Mackie and Sebastian Stan's chemistry is still undeniably electric. A team up that I don't think was meant to get as big as it did, but between how well the actors clicked and how much the characters don't, it's a dynamic that formed a life all its own. Sam's quipping and playful riffing against Bucky's stoic and no-nonsense demeanor continues to be a match made in heaven. I'm pretty sure the main reason the show was greenlit was so they could indulge in it for hours of dedicated content, and I am a-okay with that. The banter and bickering in the middle of action scenes is priceless with these two, and whoever is fortunate enough to accompany them. It's can you move your seat up times 1,000.
Can you move your seat up? No.
You're not gonna move your seat up, are you?
No.
They even have to attend couples therapy at one point. They knew what they were doing here, they indulged in it a lot, and I'm sure there are many fans out there who appreciated those moments. But as delightful as their oil and water relationship is, it has its sobering moments too. Bucky takes the fact that Sam gave up the shield really personally, furious that he would violate Steve's wishes. But Sam has his own fair share of disapproving moments in this reluctant team up, especially when Bucky falls into old habits and tactics in order to complete missions. I appreciated that it was more than just a funny partnership. They actually confront each other with their personal challenges and issues, and even help each other through them by the end. A big running theme in this series is readjusting to an ever-changing world, especially after such a world-shattering event like the blip. A lot of stories post-Endgame have touched on this to an extent, but I'd say Falcon the Winter Soldier has dedicated the most time to these questions that have no easy answers. One of the smaller but really clever examples of this is when Sam can't get a bank loan because he has no financial records over the last 5 years. Things like the complications in finances and personal records is stuff that a lot of properties don't think of because it's complicated and hypothetical, but is a logical repercussion. I think it helps make a universe like this feel more alive, but I also recognize that I just might like the really boring parts of comic book movies. Also, it turns out the Avengers are apparently non-profit. That's weird. Does that seem weird to anyone else? I mean, yes, the banker was being kind of rude for implying Sam should be wealthier as an Avenger, but no one from S.H.I.E.L.D. to Tony could be bothered to pay these people? They just get room and board and bombarded for selfies on the street for their heroism? But that's small domestic stuff. The biggest of these post-blip complications on a humanitarian level comes from our antagonist for the show, the Flag Smashers. The Flag Smashers have one goal in mind: avenge the relocated people left behind after the blip and bring the world back to what they felt was better in the 5-year gap. One world, one people. I know the Flag Smashers aren't exactly the most popular villains in the MCU, but I honestly find the angle they took with this group fascinating, because it gives us more insight into this event and its aftermath, establishing things like the GRC that was founded to relocate the population who returned. But the problem is that, like every program like this, there are those who are ignored or forgotten because they aren't considered as high a priority. In this case, the people who were around for the 5 years where half the universe vanished. Most of those people either comprise the Flag Smashers or are sympathetic towards them, spreading their message worldwide through this Pokemon Go ripoff. They feel they're being ignored, and to an extent they are, even though they kept the world running all that time. To a lot of viewers, this could be seen as boring bureaucracy, and while I understand why the Flag Smashers are considered one of the lower level bads, I like that the MCU thinks of stuff like this and has shows like Falcon the Winter Soldier to explore it in. There's a scene where our heroes find themselves at the center of a refugee site of people displaced after the blip. While those who returned are being given what they need to return to their lives, those who didn't are losing their homes, their jobs, and their communities to make room. So when Sam comes along with a genuine desire to help these people, no one is willing to reach out, because they've been burned by these promises before.
Every time something gets better for one group, it gets worse for another.
The GRC is out to help people try and get back to their lives, but are neglecting families and communities to do so, and are even shown harassing civilians who have been harboring the Flag Smashers or just being in the same area as them. The Flag Smashers look out for their own communities, but they also have extreme and dangerous ways of doing that get innocent people hurt. It's a complex topic, one that could certainly mirror real-world refugee crises, but works well enough in-universe, being unique to the circumstances of that universe, to stand on its own. If you want to see the complexities of the situation surrounding the creation of the Flag Smashers, look no further than their leader, Carly, played by Erin Kellyman. Carly was just a regular kid with regular dreams who felt powerless all her life, only exacerbated by this current crisis. So once she got a little power, she decided to take matters into her own hands. Despite her good intentions and understandable motives, the escalation of Carly's actions winds up radicalizing her cause, bringing in more restrictions on the refugees and excessive force to combat them. Sam and Bucky may be on the case, but the US has an agent of their own working on this, a plan that involves a new Star-Spangled Man.
Join me in welcoming
your new Captain America.
Boo! Bad! Do not like!
Agreed. Very negative feelings indeed.
Yep, instead of Sam getting behind the shield, this show had a new Captain America to grace us with first, John Walker, played by Wyatt Russell, nobody's favorite character. Seriously, I think John's mere existence turned people off. John was never going to be a convincing Captain America, but if you'll indulge me for a moment, I appreciated that they don't make him an obvious bad guy. When he waves at crowds and sits down on Good Morning America, nice vertical integration there, Disney, he's not putting on an act only to be revealed to be a horrendous asshole the second the cameras are off. In fact, the first scene with him in the second episode is him alone in a locker room. He doesn't start off an evil person. He has a wife and a best friend who becomes a sidekick, Lamar Hoskins, aka Battlestar, played by Clay Bennett, emphasizing that while we all know deep down he's the wrong man for the job, he wants to be a good Captain America. He wants to do the mantle the symbol proud and wants the approval of Cap's former teammates. But of course they aren't going to give it to him, because why would they? The funny thing about John is that he seems to be the model soldier that was originally being considered as the super soldier serum subject back in World War II. He's a top-notch fighter in peak physical condition with a glowing service record. What everyone in charge is forgetting is that's not why Steve Rogers was chosen to be Captain America, but more on that later. The choice to recruit John for this part had more to do with external strength than it did internal virtue. I do believe that John wants to be a good Captain America, but the problem is that he doesn't really know what that means. He thinks he does, and he uses his considerable influence with that title to try and uphold that. Except he crosses the line of abusing that power really quickly. From small things like interfering with Bucky's mandated therapy so he can get him on his team, to big things like almost assaulting civilians assisting the Flag Smashers, to bigger big things like, well, we'll get to that. John is assigned to uphold a force that those in charge are hoping will be an easy solution to a problem that, unfortunately, doesn't have a punch it and it will go away solution. Side note, Wyatt Russell plays this part really well. He got some flack when the show was airing, something that sadly tends to happen with unlikable characters, but John Walker is kind of a tall order of a character in terms of what you're getting yourself into, and Russell really rose to the occasion. Plus, it's kind of cool we have two generations of Russells in the MCU now, except Wyatt has a decent chance of making a return.
Well, of course I have issues. That's my freaking father.
But because this is the MCU, that means we have returning characters in the mix as well. The most anticipated perhaps being Helmut Zemo, played by Daniel Bruhl. Zemo's return was announced pretty early on, which was pretty exciting. Outside of the likes of Loki and Thanos, returning villains aren't really a thing in the MCU. They're usually a one and done deal. Plus, this was a chance for the team to do some retooling, because Zemo's portrayal in Captain America Civil War was somewhat divisive, since his presentation in that movie is significantly different from how he is in the comics. Now, that's not a new thing for the MCU by any stretch. Since day one, they've made an effort to make these iconic characters their own, but that didn't stop some hardcore fans from wanting a more traditional Baron Zemo on screen. Well, with this show, they do some compromising. Zemo is recruited to assist the titular pair for a couple of episodes, which sort of involves breaking him out of prison, but as you might notice, Bucky's having a bit of trouble letting go of his renegade assassin instincts. But there's no false pretenses here. Zemo is not trustworthy, like not even a little, but Sam and Bucky know this, and while they follow his lead, it's at the end of a tight leash. It's nice that there's no obvious moment of betrayal or fooling the heroes. Zemo plays along for as long as he can, quietly sneaks away, and then is promptly arrested again. Now about those compromises. We do learn more about Zemo and his time on the show, and some of it seemed retconny to me. From things like his resentment towards superpower people going back generations instead of just because of the Sokovia incident, which kind of bothers me, but not a lot, to the reveal that his family is royalty, and despite his country being destroyed, he's still very rich. There, you got your title. He's Baron Zemo now. Happy? Then there's that pesky purple mask. The most iconic part of Zemo in the comics, which was omitted in Civil War because, let's be honest, even by comic standards, this looks really silly. I still remember the excitement when Zemo's return was announced with a short video of him in the mask. The Wizards and Marvel's costume department actually managed to make it look kind of scary too. However, when it came time to deliver on that in the show, it felt kind of like an afterthought. They allude to it a bit when Zemo is plotting, then he puts it on during a fight scene for a grand total of 30 seconds, and then we never see it again. We don't know what it is, why he has it, or why he chose to wear it there, but it's there alright. As a whole, I think Zemo's involvement in the show was a mixed bag, but it was great to see more of him up close. Getting to watch exactly how he can pull the strings to move things in his favor, and including him in a situation where there are ongoing debates over who should wield superhuman power, fits in well with the show's conflict. Brule is amazing in the part, and there are some interesting directions you could go in with this villain. It honestly makes me hope we'll see him again someday. We also have the return of Agent Carter. God, I wish. No, it's Sharon Carter, played by Emily Van Camp, a character who has, to be frank, been incredibly underwhelming. Even if you're a fan of Sharon, I don't think many people disagree with me there. But for me, her appearance in this show changed that by taking her character in a whole new direction. Sharon is another character who was given the short end of the stick by the authorities. In this case, she's still deemed a criminal for helping Cap and the others out during the events of Civil War. We all know that incident really shook up the cinematic universe, and I like that the consequences of those times aren't forgotten just because something bigger came along to distract from it. Building on one of the show's main conflicts surrounding those who get forgotten or left behind. Except now we have a familiar face to attach that strife to. Sharon had to go completely off the grid and has leaned fully into the life of a criminal, believing she's the only person she can count on anymore, becoming completely bitter to the idea of heroes and what they represent in the most condescending ways imaginable. As Bucky puts it,
She's kind of awful now.
but at least she's a character now, so I'd say it's an upgrade. She does help the group for old time's sake and to hopefully get her record cleared, but not without acknowledging how Sam and even Bucky got a free pass for their actions, but she wasn't as lucky. It's hard to argue with her there, and I think it's important to point out. I also find her inclusion amusing because for an entire episode, Sam is surrounded by a team well versed in the criminal world, and it has a weird fish out of water angle to it that I absolutely loved.
You know, half the artwork in museums like the Louvre is fake.
Okay, guys, I see what you're doing. You're more worldly than good old Sam.
What's Google say?
No shit.
Come on.
Oh, and did I mention the Dora Milaje show up too? Yeah, it turns out the Wakandans aren't too happy about the man they help reform freeing the criminal who was responsible for the death of their king. You can't really blame them there. They don't add too much to the overall discussion in the show, but man were they a welcome addition. After 2.5 episodes of John's growing entitled attitude, I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel pretty good to watch the Dora Milaje beat him up with little effort.
Looking strong, John.
Stop! Don't!
But the highlight of their involvement is getting a look into Bucky's time healing in Wakanda. The way Bucky tenses up as they test those words that have been commanding and ruling him for so many years are uttered. How he breaks down when he realizes that they don't work anymore. And he's free. It's one of the most powerful moments depicted in the MCU so far. Sebastian Stan's performance is awards-worthy. Going through such a wide range of life-altering emotions as the camera just holds on him. It's astounding. In all honesty, you could cut the interference from the Dora Milaje from the story, and very little would change, which you think would be a negative, but honestly, every scene with them is so cool and carries so much power behind it that it leaves a strong impression, as Wakandans tend to do. However, while it is great to have so many perspectives on the issues in this show, mirroring real life, because the story revolves around complex political and humanitarian problems with no easy solutions, it does result in a lot of scenes of characters lounging around, sharing their opinions, and debating them amongst themselves, causing the pace to slow down a lot, at least from what you'd expect from the genre. In fact, I think the pacing was the main criticism for this show at the time. Now, this might not have bothered me on either of my viewings because, again, I kind of eat this kind of intricacy up in this franchise, but I understand that it's not what everyone is here for and can seem boring, monotonous, or like nothing is really getting done. Because for the first 5 episodes or so, nothing is. But don't worry, if you want to see characters trying to solve their problems through punching in true superhero fashion, this show has plenty of that to offer. Not an episode goes by without at least 2 fight sequences, carrying over the style of action from the Russo Captain America movies, consisting mostly of elaborate close hand-to-hand combat. The action is really where you feel the rush. It's almost a relief from the more intense debates going on in between. The Captain America franchise still knows how to make a car chase exhilarating, and the globetrotting backdrops help add variety to the set pieces and strategies. Given the stars of the show are a former assassin and one of the stealthier Avengers, it's much more about covert operations than bombastic battles or otherworldly encounters, sneaking around and not drawing attention to try and find answers. But this isn't like in Civil War or Winter Soldier, where there's an obvious outside force manipulating already established paranoia and regulations. Falcon the Winter Soldier is filled with people who want to do the right thing, they just have different definitions of what that means and how far you have to go to do it. And going into the second half of the show, those differing views reach a boiling point. By episode 4, all the players are in the same location and conflicting over how to deal with this ever-escalating situation. Through the whole thing, Sam is trying to be the great mediator, the middle ground in between a pair of extremes, understanding both sides while trying to get both sides to understand each other. Sam does get close to getting that much-needed cooperation a couple of times, but every time either Carly's sense of mistrust or John's forceful stubbornness get in the way, which means more fists flying and greater danger on the horizon. You see, one of the reasons the Flag Smashers are such a big threat is that they've been exhibiting super strength in all their confrontations. You could say it's super soldier strength. Yeah, this stuff is back again. I thought the serum was supposed to be really hard to replicate, but it turns out enlisted scientists from Russia all the way to the CIA have managed to do it. Goody. Through circumstances that aren't really worth explaining here, the main members of the Flag Smashers got their hands on it and have been using their newfound strength to reclaim what is theirs. The continued battle over what's left of the serum could also be seen as an extension of the misunderstanding behind Captain America's power. For the first 3/4 of the show, this is basically our MacGuffin. The Flag Smashers want to keep and use what vials they have left, Zemo wants to and eventually gets to destroy all of said vials, but misses one. And that one is where our current captain has a choice to make. At this point, John was losing a lot of his confidence, really feeling the pressure to perform at the level expected of Captain America, and getting insecure every time his authority was ignored or he lost a fight. He takes a loss against Dora Milaje particularly hard. Now, as an audience member, it's easy to point and laugh at these failures, but John's feelings of inadequacy are increasing, and it makes him more desperate each time to make sure it doesn't happen again. His own insecurity at his ability to handle the mantle of Captain America and the threats that come with them is what convinces him to take the last dose of the serum himself, embracing the superficial strength of Captain America, constantly messing up what could be peaceful resolutions. And unfortunately, John is about to face the consequences of that behavior, but not being the one who paid the price. Lamar, John's best friend, is killed by Carly. All this time, Lamar has been the voice of reason and encouragement for his friend. When things didn't work out in John's favor, he was always able to calm him down and make him take a step back, acting as the rational one who truly had John's best interests at heart. Now, serving as his best friend's sidekick, cost him his life. The fact that it's so instant makes it even more shocking. It's a blink and you'll miss it death. Now, I feel it's important to note that Lamar's death was kind of an accident, but unintended casualties like that are what happens when you take an extreme approach to resolving a conflict. People will get hurt, and not always the people you want to hurt, which in this case applies to both the Flag Smashers and Walker. Neither of them meant for this to happen, but it did. Now, all bets are off. The only person ever able to keep John Walker from doing anything drastic is gone. And one of the Flag Smashers, the guy who didn't even do this, is about to find out that that's a really, really bad thing.
I've been traumatized.
Do I need to explain why this is horrifying? The implications behind this moment? I don't think I do. I think you all know. In my eyes, nothing, not even the likes of Moon Knight or even Multiverse of Madness, compares to the shock and brutality of this moment and what it represents. This soldier, meant to uphold an ideal, the man behind a symbol that represents the best virtues of a nation, let out his ugly, unhinged anger on someone who not only did nothing to deserve this, but looked up to Captain America when he was younger. The onlookers witnessing this unhinged moment from every angle, including Sam, Bucky, and Carly, recording the image of Captain America's shield, a symbol of freedom and righteousness and defending the defenseless, dripping with murderous blood, is going to be burned into the brains of every Marvel fan forever. This action made me physically recoil as I watched it. I actually jumped back. I was shaking for several minutes afterwards. Sam and Bucky had never been crazy about John being appointed as Captain America, but until now, they just felt like they had to accept it. Now, there's no more excuses. John has proven himself unfit to be behind that shield, and they'll take it back by force if they have to. And then they have to. But even getting the shield back isn't enough. It still doesn't have a home because Sam still won't accept it. And why is that? John has clearly proven himself as an incapable successor. Sam has been doing the work in a just and civil way all this time. Why not just take over the mantle himself? Well, for us, and maybe even Sam to understand why, we need to talk about a character introduced that you might be surprised took me this long to mention: Isaiah Bradley, played by Martian Manhunter and Martian Manhunter's father himself, Carl Lumley. Isaiah is introduced in episode 2 and revealed to be a super soldier, the result of experiments attempted by the government to recreate that darn serum. Sam is understandably outraged to learn that there was a black super soldier that no one has ever heard of, and a good one too. Someone who could take on the Winter Soldier in a fight and come back alive. Sam's the kind of guy who will do everything he can to do right by others. When it comes time to choose the shield's rightful bearer, he heads straight back to Isaiah to give it to him.
But you were a super soldier like Steve. You could have been the next.
The next? What? They will never let a black man be Captain America.
I wouldn't say racism is the main theme of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but when your major themes are how marginalized groups of class and ethnicity are mistreated and neglected by systems that should be protecting them, and the possibility of a black man taking on the mantle of Captain America, it's kind of an unavoidable conversation to have. And Isaiah's story encapsulates all of this. A story that is eerily similar to Cap's first mission back in World War II, but with a much different outcome for the hero. A parallel that was probably intentional. Isaiah was punished and erased from the lives of his loved ones for doing the right thing, to cover up someone else's crimes. This is already cruel and unfair, but when you think about the fact that Cap was gone for so long, and there were people ready to fill his shoes, but they weren't wanted as representation by the systems that made them, it made it even more unjust. Add to this the fact that this could be seen as an example of erasing black people from history and their own accomplishments and places in it, which, make no mistake, does happen and happens a lot. You can see why, when we're talking about a black man becoming a symbol for America, we need to explore the implications there and have these conversations. Maybe this is what Sam's been struggling with deep down since Steve gave him the shield. I do think Isaiah is wrong about Sam's own ignorance, but it's understandable why he doesn't want to be found out, why he just wants to hide away away and be left alone. Because what has this country ever done for him besides hurt him? Some have criticized this approach and either its lack of nuance or simplification of larger systemic issues. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on these issues. I'm a white girl from a small suburban town in upstate New York, so I understand my credentials are pretty much non-existent. But I sympathize and learn where I can, and know that there are issues that need to be addressed. But a key component of that for me is how you address them. No, a show should not get social brownie points simply for bringing up a difficult topic, because execution is equally as important, if not more so. You do it incorrectly, and you could be spreading a damaging image out into the world. Media is influential, thus how you approach tackling these subjects is crucial. The most obvious example from this show is probably the cop scene, where Sam and Bucky are approached by two police officers when they have an argument in the street, and things escalate from seemingly nothing, besides the fact that one of the participants is black and one is white. Some thought this exchange was fitting and accurate, others thought it was out of place and unsubtle. Again, I don't know how much I can vouch for this scene, but given the subjects tackled in the show, I'd say it was appropriate and well done at getting the point across. Passable Media actually dedicated a One Marvelous Scene video to the scene, breaking down the nuance of it, so go give that a watch. It's really good. As for it being too blatant, let's get to a point where everyone can agree that there is bias in the system and this happens all the time. Then we'll talk about subtlety. While Falcon the Winter Soldier can feel very Systemic Oppression 101 at times, I think people underestimate the fact that one of the biggest franchises in the world is approaching these subjects in a way that feels so deeply connected to the characters and their lives. In a way that could resonate with people who might find these subjects too broad to relate to, or in a way where people could see their favorite heroes face similar problems that they have. It's not just that they're discussing unjust treatment of African Americans by the US government, is that they're having these conversations while a well-known black character who has been relegated to a sidekick like practically every other African-American character in this franchise, is conflicted about his feelings of representing a title that is unmistakably American. It keeps these issues in a personal and familiar place, both applying it to our world and the MCU. We'll come back to these larger issues once we go into how the story ultimately resolves, but in the meantime, the rest of episode 5 is dedicated to our two leads sorting out their problems together while fixing a boat, and Bucky crashes on their couch. This episode is everything I wanted these Disney Plus shows to be. Downtime with side characters for the win! Bucky even apologizes for how much he didn't understand Sam's feelings about picking up the shield, admitting the attachment he has to it and how seeing it given up made him feel more isolated and alone. It's easy to see that Bucky's feeling pretty insecure about his own redemption.
So maybe he was wrong about you, and if he was wrong about you, then he was wrong about me.
Even if none of his actions as the Winter Soldier were technically as himself, they were still things he did. He remembers all of them. Every life taken, every drop of blood on his hands. Which is a part of the brainwashing story that can be easy to overlook because audiences are more interested in assigning blame, but they confront that reality with Bucky in perhaps the most devastating way imaginable. There's this small subplot about an old man Bucky has befriended. Conceptually, it's amusing and poignant that the only person Bucky seems to be able to connect with is a senior citizen, but there's also the fact that, as the Winter Soldier, he killed this man's son. Between that guilt hanging over him, his feelings about the shield, and this scene where Bucky had to hurt random bar patrons to keep up appearances while undercover, outside influences are making Bucky question if he can ever truly be anything else than what Hydra made him. In this downtime though, Sam tells Bucky to stop letting people tell him who he is. Being free to succeed or fail on his terms is the only way he'll be able to move past that. It's going to be tough and hard work, but he has to do it, and do it the right way. Advice Bucky definitely takes to heart. He comes clean to his friend in the final episode, and it does indeed turn out to be unforgivable. But he can say to himself that in this case, he did the right thing. Something that he probably hasn't been able to say for quite some time. Bucky is done being a killing machine. There are other ways to enact justice, and he'll take those routes for the sake of preserving his humanity because now he has the freedom to do so. MCU. I really hope going forward that Sam and Bucky have more talks like this. Given Sam's past as a counselor for veterans, something that I'm honestly shocked doesn't come up more often, I'm sure it could help a lot. On top of his apology, Bucky also admits that neither he nor Steve could really understand what it meant to give a black man the shield, realizing through this whole adventure how complicated its legacy really is. What they have to figure out now is, what's its legacy going to be moving forward? There's been a lot of talk about the conflicting feelings of what the shield represents for all the characters involved, becoming such a problem that it almost seems better for everyone if it were destroyed. And it's mentioned so much that it makes you question briefly if they're actually gonna go there. When they put comments like that in the previously on section, it seems like a given. What Sam comes to terms with is that change and progress never happen by people just sitting around and surrendering to the way things are or were. Him and Steve obviously come from very different backgrounds, but what they do have in common is how important it was for each of them to wield that shield. The fact that they are both, in their own ways, so different from the American ideal is why it's so important that they hold the mantle, because they are what that ideal should really be. People who are compassionate, dedicated, and diverse.
People are lost. They need a leader who looks like them, who understands their pain.
Sam admits that he can't win every fight, so he's gonna choose the important ones. Even if it's just going back home to repair a beat-up fishing boat, preserving a legacy around a black family who made a difference in a community. Sam's strength comes from his experiences, his resolve, his perspective, his stubborn determination. He doesn't have any super soldier serum. He's just a regular guy, a man wholeheartedly dedicated to the things he believes in, spending his time building his muscle and stamina so he can handle fighting with the shield and whatever battles will be placed in front of them. Inner strength driving the development of outer strength. It's a pretty triumphant montage that I could definitely see motivating viewers at home. And this brings us to the moment we've all been waiting for.
Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh!
I watched this final episode with a couple of friends in a Discord call, and we screamed at this entrance. It was awesome! Okay, first, the costume. Perfect. A lot of Falcon's time in the MCU has been grounding his comic book elements into something more palatable for PG-13 live action, but as Captain America, the costume looks like it leapt right off the pages of the comic and onto our screens. One of the best one-to-one translations in the entire franchise. The action scenes with it are spectacular, with Sam using every tool at his disposal with utmost precision. In universe, it's also incredibly fitting that the Wakandans made the tech and uniform for this Captain America. It was a long journey to get to this point, but it was so magnificent once we reached it.
I'm sorry, wait, who are you?
Captain America.
Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh!
Most of the final episode is Sam and Bucky getting back into the fight to finish what they started, in one big brawling race against the Flag Smashers to make sure no one else gets hurt as they fight for their cause, and get more violent. In fact, the other members start showing concern at how much more extreme Carly's actions are getting. Carly's actions have gotten more sketchy and unethical as her desperation to achieve her goal has grown, but it doesn't matter. Not to Carly. Carly doesn't even value her own life anymore over what she's fighting for. Nothing else matters now but the fight, the cause, which is why her eventual confrontation with Sam, now as Captain America, is so brilliant, because Sam doesn't fight back. He simply defends himself, an approach that makes Carly almost hysterical. She's so used to being beaten down and being forced to fight back, she can't stand the idea of being the one who starts the fight. They started it. She's just defending herself. But what happens when you're the only one fighting? When no one is trying to hurt you at that moment? For someone who's been hurt for so long, it looks like it's tough to comprehend. And then I don't love that Carly had to die, but if she did, it is incredibly important to me that Sam isn't the one who did that, but Sharon. Not only is it more significant that Carly's own questionable actions of messing with the wrong people delivered a karma-fueled finishing blow, but having Sam kill Carly, a kid who at the end of the day he sympathized with and tried to help several times, would have felt wrong, even if it was in defense. Falcon the Winter Soldier has a lot of characters that are antagonistic, but I wouldn't say it has a main villain. villain, or at least a traditional supervillain. The villain should typically be someone who caused the most heartbreak and problems in the story, whoever hurts the other characters the most. And in this show, that's these guys. The politicians have been severely misunderstanding the needs of the people they are supposed to protect. A lot of characters on this show could be seen as a victim of these systems. The Flag Smashers were formed because they were cast aside, denied basic resources and homes because they were seen as less of a priority than the people who returned from the blip. Sam may have served his country, but he's also a black man from a small community in the South who has seen mistreatment by larger authorities of people like him. Sam is only ever given the smallest amount of adoration when people realize he's an Avenger, which is a whole other level of offensive. And as much as nobody likes him or wants to empathize with him, John Walker could be seen as a victim of this as well. Yes, he was chosen to be Captain America. Yes, he is a decorated and respected soldier, but a lot of those accolades came from committing terrible atrocities in war. We're not really told what he did as a soldier, but John was essentially rewarded for doing the most horrible things he's ever done in his life. And once he went too far in his duty as Captain America and became a figure the government did not want to associate themselves with, instead of examining their own choices and what might have happened, they cast him aside. It's no surprise he went rogue, made a homemade shield in his garage like a second-rate cosplayer, and stormed into the final fight with his unhinged nonsense. But when it seems like his darker impulses are not only going to get the better of him again, but completely consume him, John is given a choice between getting revenge and saving lives, and ultimately makes the right choice. And we're just going to pause on my main point here and talk about this real quick, because I know a lot of people were not fond of this decision. Some fans wish that Marvel had let John give into his destructive impulses and make the wrong choice here, solidifying his path forward. I could definitely understand the desire to see that happen, but like I've been saying, just like Carly, he's been damaged and tossed aside by a system that was supposed to support him. He may be the most privileged character in this cast, but that doesn't mean he doesn't deserve the slightest hint at one day redeeming himself. Whether we'll actually get there someday is still yet to be seen, but frankly, I doubt it. But he does eventually go all red and black edgy anti-hero by the end, as his transformation into US agent is complete thanks to Julia Louis-Dreyfus? Julia Louis-Dreyfus. I mean, I guess I shouldn't be surprised by who Marvel can cast in these projects anymore, but that one threw me through a loop. I'm sure that will make sense someday. Besides, he still fails at doing the right thing anyway, and the real Captain America rescues these people. Okay, back to the main point. On every level, Sam is the perfect choice to be Captain America right now, because unlike the people in charge, he listens. He talks to everyone on their level, does his best to understand them, and tries to help. He's been doing that through this entire show. He's the only one willing to listen to what Carly actually has to say. He cooperates with the politicians taken hostage to save them. He wants to give Sharon another chance to get her life back. He tries to make things right with Isaiah. He gives Bucky some much needed words of wisdom. He even tries to talk John down after that scene. Doing the right thing and being the bigger person sometimes means saving and cooperating with people you don't like, but that doesn't equal letting them get away with what they've done. So in the most cathartic scene, not just in this show, but perhaps the entire cinematic universe, Sam uses his position of power and influence to hold these people accountable. Man, along with the shield, Sam seems to have inherited Steve's inspiring speech powers.
This girl died trying to stop you. And no one has stopped for 1 second to ask why.
He knows that Carly was fighting for something important, and he's going to let these people know that the Flag Smashers weren't just thugs or terrorists, but people fighting for their right to survive. In the Marvel Universe, the blip gave this world a common struggle, to remember how it felt to feel helpless, confused, and lost. And while we know from recent real-world experiences that shared struggle doesn't necessarily equal shared cooperation or benefits, Sam's speech is there to make sure these people remember that feeling, and when they see it inside of others, to maybe do something about it.
We can't demand that people step up and we don't meet them halfway.
Such an important line there. That might be the most important line in the entire show. There are so many things that we're told fall on the shoulders of the individual. Environmentalism, social justice, healthcare, economics. But the truth is, as powerful as a hero can be, an individual can only do so much. The larger governmental systems that wield so much power have to do their part as well if we ever expect to get by. And Sam knows this. Since episode 1, the show has been asking questions along the lines of, what do symbols like Captain America really mean anymore? What brings people together when they feel the most divided? And if a black man became Captain America, what would that mean? And would it change anything? Sam understands that deciding to become the new Captain America is a difficult and unpopular decision. There are people who are going to hate him for it. Whether it's racists who don't want a black man representing their country, or people like him who believe he's being a hypocrite by donning a title that has been so oppressive to black Americans. But the important thing about Sam, the thing that will make him a great Captain America, is that he believes in the capacity for change. Like his predecessor, he didn't always embody everything the Americans in charge wanted him to, but stood by his own convictions and beliefs unwaveringly. The ability to do better if you're willing to get out there and try, even when it seems like the entire world is against you. That, boys and girls, is an American ideal we should all aspire to in the 21st century. As long as Sam holds that position, he's gonna make sure all the fighting and sacrifice of those who came before him wasn't in vain. And like he did with fixing his family boat back home, he could start in a smaller place that's equally as important. In the first episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we're reacquainted with Captain America's exhibit at the Smithsonian, now updated to include current events like the blip and a memorial for Steve. Now, learning what he has, Sam gets Isaiah's history as a super soldier indoctrinated into the Captain America exhibit, taking a small step towards repairing the past. He can't change it, but he can change how people remember it. And with any luck, as the new Sentinel of Liberty, how people will see the future.
I'll do my best.
That's why it's yours.
Overall, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier is one of the more divisive shows in the Marvel Disney Plus lineup, but as my most anticipated of the bunch, it was pretty much everything I wanted it to be, and a little more. It's not as groundbreaking as something like WandaVision, but it's a good example of what this area of the MCU can offer to the experience of following the larger universe. How these shows will be similar to the adventures you already know, and how they'll be worth your extra time as a chance to explore side characters deeper. The production value is solid, the characters are lively and work well off each other, both in moments of teamwork and conflict, and while the story takes its sweet time getting the point across and has some inclusions that could be seen as superfluous, doing its best but perhaps struggling to meet the 6-episode demand, the thematic elements come together rather nicely by the end to deliver something that could really leave an impact. And I'm not saying there isn't stuff to criticize here in how the show presents its themes. There most certainly is, and you're free to disagree with any of the points I've made in this video. But as I've said before, I can only speak for myself and express my own views as best I can. And I personally thought that by the end, the show grounded these larger topics into something relatable, it placed the blame in the proper places, and most importantly, it showed that hearts and minds can be won even when it seems like nothing will change. I'm old-fashioned. I want to be given the opportunity to learn, to change, and to hand that chance off to others. Because if we take people at face value or judge them based on one or two actions, good or bad, what chance does progress have? But this also shows progress for the MCU. With Sam Wilson as Captain America, we now have legacy heroes incorporated into the franchise. New characters taking on familiar mantles that will keep franchises and titles going while offering the chance to face different challenges. Perhaps what I've loved most about Phase 4 so far is the push to bring in the next generation of heroes. As the old guard slowly stands down after Endgame, images like this assure me that this world is in good hands. Yet another way Marvel will always be superior to DC's movies, at least for the time being. This year at San Diego Comic-Con, the next Captain America movie starring Sam Wilson was officially announced, and I cannot wait for it. Steve Rogers may be gone, but his spirit lives on in his two best friends. Sam and Bucky are the heart of this show. A pair that started off as hanging out because they had to, has evolved to where each of them helped the other reach new heights and find new purpose. And like I said at the end of WandaVision, I am really looking forward to seeing what the future will hold for both of them. Thanks for watching, everyone. Definitely let me know what you thought of the show in the comments below. That's why the series is called Let's Talk About. I want to give a very special thanks to my patrons who help support my content, including Dave L. Sproul, Sebastian Canino of Sid McGinn Reviews, Chelsea A. Crandall, Hawk Hero, Jinx Productions, and Wait in the Wings. If you'd like to join these fine people in supporting my content while getting cool exclusive perks, you can check out my Patreon page at the link in the description, as well as some other social media if you'd like to check out any of those. Thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you guys next time.